Welcome back to another episode of the Carbon Cardboard Podcast covering Formula One and the Formula One card hobby. I'm your host, Bryan, Q3 Cards, joined as always with my good friend Scott from the F1 Castle. Continue to nail it. It's only taken me
There you
like
go.
12 episodes to get this down. Don't have to add the additional at the
Right. Just from the F1 Castle. There you go.
from the F1 Castle. You are the F1 Castle, my friend.
That's true. Absolutely.
Wow. What a F1's F1's back. It's
2 weeks off.
raw cheek.
I know, right?
I love that meme.
That's right.
I didn't get it the first time, but you know, it's if you haven't, just Google that, and it's just funny. It's just fun. I try to think of how it originally had started, and I don't know if it was Ferrari or Mercedes.
Ferrari. For sure.
Yeah, Ferrari. Yeah. And
Yep.
they were like trying to stack the words, like, you know, they had race on one side and then week on the other, and if you read it left to right, it looked like raw cheek. So
That's
it's
right.
raw cheek. Imola. Scott,
back.
can you say the full name of this race? Is that
Oh
Emilia
my God.
Romagna?
Well, it's no. I mean, like the whole name is absolutely insane. Like honestly, the entire name like is like now, and they keep adding in like the sponsor because like it's Emilia Romagna, right? But it's like the Formula One MSC Cruises Gran Primo Day Made in Italy e d'Emilia Romagna 2024 Grand Prix. That is the full name, which is absolutely insane. But here we are. Modern
It
day
has
Formula
more
One.
names than Carlos Sainz does, because Carlos Sainz's real name is quite
Oh my
long.
gosh, it's insane. Yeah, but yeah, I like to call it Imola. We're racing in Imola. There we go.
And I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but maybe I have. But I started watching Formula One in 2021, and I happened to miss the first race of that season. And in 2021, Imola happened to be the second race on the calendar.
That's right.
And that was my introduction to Formula One, and it hooked me. I mean, I can still
That was
tell
a
you
banger of a race.
yeah, I can still tell you the podium finish. It was Max, Lewis, and Lando. I know Lewis chased down Lando with maybe 10 laps left or something. And I still didn't really know a lot about a lot of the drivers and stuff, but like it's kind of funny how I ended up gravitating towards a lot of those same, you know, drivers. You know, Max, Lando, obviously Lewis is an all-time great. Just yeah, it's fun. I always like coming back to this race, and it's really unfortunate because we did not race here last year, Scott, due to the flooding in Imola.
Terrible. Yeah, I mean the weather obviously was really bad last year, and you know it's funny because I feel like the media either tries to like overhype or undersell things depending on what the narrative wants to be. So last year is like, no, it's just some rain. You know, don't worry about it. And then it was like, oh, okay, no, this is definitely not happening. You know, like people's lives are at jeopardy. So
Catastrophic floods. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's raining there now, and people are like, oh God, here we go again. But it's nothing like last year. So we may get a wet weekend. You know what? It rains here a lot around the time that they come. Like you talk about that 2021 race. It was a wet weekend, that race. I mean, that race, Lewis Hamilton went off and almost ended his race. He ended up, you know, he was just like passing like a lap car, you know, and went off the track. And, you know, then of course he was saved by Bottas and Russell colliding. So he got to unlap himself. And, you know, I think Mercedes had a pretty good car 2021. So he came all the way back from like 18th to 2nd to secure some good points. But yeah, that was a great race. That was actually what an introduction to F1. If that was the first race you saw, because it had everything. I mean, it had like Lewis and Max battling right at the start, putting Lewis over the curb, and then it had a big crash and wet weather, changeable conditions. That was a really good race to come in on. 2021 Imola, 2022 Imola, still pretty decent. You know, Leclerc trying to go for it on Sergio Perez, ultimately spins around, hits the wall, but is able to reverse, comes in 6th. Max and Checo completed the 1-2 for Red Bull. But Imola always has a little bit of a spicy weekend, and in recent memory, it's always been wet. So great track, classic track.
So we've got the track on screen for those watching on YouTube here. So, like you said, this is fast. There's a lot of straightaways here, lots of action, and like you said, just going back to like that 2021 race where, you know, George thought he had the line on Bottas and the infamous crash, and that may have actually caused Toto to wait on holding off and announcing him as his 2022
Maybe.
driver. Maybe gave him some pause, but
Russell gave Bottas a nice little tap on the head over there. They exchanged words. And spicy. That was spicy.
I think Drive to Survive made it far worse than it was, but it still was not good. And
Yeah.
actually, I think afterwards, Russell finally did apologize, for being in the wrong on that one. So,
Yeah. Behind closed doors, though, he's like, nah, it's Bottas' fault.
so the interesting thing that Scott and I think what we're going to
Oh,
talk a lot about today is Formula 2 is back. Like it's been 2
yes.
months.
It really had the last time they raced was in Australia when I was there. It's crazy. 2 months ago. It's weird, how they can have a 2-month break. And, we'll talk about it a little bit, but it impacts the card market, man, for sure. Because I mean, we saw, Behrman was skyrocketing in price. Zane Maloney, who was doing really well, was going up in price. A lot of these drivers who were having good seasons, their cards were selling for a good amount. And hey, you don't race for 2 months, and people forget the series exists, and all of a sudden, those F2 spots are hard to move, and the card values are going down. I expect to see some bumps up for whoever does well this weekend for sure.
So, obviously, rightfully so, we focus primarily on the Formula 1 circuit of this, but we have not talked about Formula 2 recently just because there hasn't been any action, like you said. So,
Yeah.
there's a couple storylines that we should follow here. I'll have you walk us through a few of them. Make sure I've got the right slide coming up next. But obviously, let's start with probably the most relevant. Well, there's a couple storylines. I'll ask you about Kimi Antonelli in a little bit here, but on screen, Scott, Oliver Behrman decked out in his Haas MoneyGram suit.
That's right.
Explain to those that may be a little confused that the last time we saw him in a Formula One car, it was in Scuderia Ferrari HP. Well, not HP at the time, but I still
Right.
can't get over that name. Enzo is
Uh,
probably turning in his grave.
I
Uh,
know.
but Scott, walk us through Oliver Behrman suited up for Haas here.
Yeah. So obviously, last time when he was out here, he was in Ferrari because he was filling in. He is a reserve driver for Ferrari, so he was filling in for Carlos Sainz when he had appendicitis and had surgery to have his appendix removed. But each team throughout the year does different young driver FP1 sessions. You're actually mandated to have 3 per throughout the season. So Oliver Behrman is getting some FP1 sessions with Haas, also with Ferrari. He's going to have multiple FP1 sessions with different F1 teams throughout the season, but he is doing one of his Haas FP1 sessions right now. Ferrari's like, hey, we want him to get more time in a car, so we're going to throw him in your car. And he also has a very high probability of being a race car driver in Formula One for Haas next season. So good for him to get some time in the car. But yeah, he will be taking over the car. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't know do you know whose car he's actually going to be taking over? I wonder if it's, is it Magnussen or is it Hulkenberg's car that he's actually driving for the weekend? Let me see if I can find
Well,
out.
if we weren't a bunch of hacks, and I'm gonna buy you some
True.
time. This is us being professionals here. So I'm gonna stall a little bit while you
Yeah.
look, and I'm
He's
just gonna
taking
pretend like,
K-Mag's car because
"Hey, we knew that."
I think
I'm
they're
just
worried that if they give K-Mag an FP1 session, he might get 2 points and get a race ban. So they're like, "All right, pull him out of the car, put Behrman in." But yeah, so he'll be driving alongside Nico Hulkenberg in FP1.
Man, we are a bunch of hacks for sure.
But yeah, so it's
But
exciting. It's exciting anytime F2 drivers get time in F1 machinery. Not only Does it help them? They get super license points, by the way, every time they do an FP1 session. But also, I mean, time in an F1 car is invaluable. I mean, F2 cars, they're extremely fast, powerful. They are not Formula One cars. The acceleration, the braking, I mean, just the overall speed that you carry around corners in a Formula One car is much different. And this is really good for Behrman. I mean, the more time you can get in an F1 car, the better. So, really good to see him getting some time. There'll be some other drivers getting time. Behrman, really looking forward to this. Hopefully, he does well. Again, it's not so much about, putting up kind of showboating times or anything. Like, I doubt they'll do any like low fuel glory runs. It's really just about getting time in the car, getting comfortable with F1 machinery, going through the program, getting used to, the beginnings of an F1 weekend. So, yeah, excited for him. Good for him.
So as a fan, like you just rattled off a couple of the things that we probably won't see as a fan, and I guess we'll speak to those that are collecting and potentially hoarding Oliver Behrman cars at this point. What is a successful FP1 session for him? Obviously not crashing, but what else?
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly, that is actually what you mentioned is the main thing. Not crashing is important. I mean, if that's the worst thing you can do. I mean, honestly, there's not too much you can do that's going to wow and shock people really in an FP1 session, because again, they're not going to run at low fuel and let him do a glory run. So he's not going to put up any insane times. Really what he's trying to do is just run the program smoothly. You want to see him just don't have any crazy lockups, spins, or crashes, and that's a good outing. And if he can stay close to Hulkenberg, hell, if he could maybe even, come out ahead of Hulkenberg again, we don't know if they're going to be running identical programs, but if he can be near Hulkenberg, extremely impressive, and that'd be a great outing for him. I don't know that there's much he can do to move the needle in terms of like increasing card values in an FP1 session for a Haas, given that he's done a full race in a Ferrari. But he could move it the other way by crashing. So really, it just keep your nose clean, Behrman. And I think they'll be telling him that. So he knows.
We'll look at the F2 standings here in just a moment. But the other thing I want to ask you, Scott, and I guess this is more conjecture or rumors at this point with Kimi Antonelli and what we've known, what he's done for his Mercedes test. There was some swirling rumors that potentially this was the race that, Logan Sargent was potentially going to be done in Miami. Completely far-fetched, if you ask me.
Yeah, no shot.
Antonelli fever is right there. We still don't have any cards for him, but I mean, the fact that, James Bowles has already been talking about like, this definitely is not going to happen, but, we're still considering our options for, 2025. Apparently there's been, a petition or whatever they need to sign or get filled out with the FIA to potentially let him race prior to being 18. I think he does have the super license points to do that. However, he's, after Max, came in as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, whatever he was, they're more careful, of that going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was actually the rule was made because of Max. Back when Max was coming in, there was no such thing as like, oh, you got to have a certain amount of super license points. That wasn't a thing. And then Max came in, they're like, whoa, we've got 17-year-olds in a Formula One car full time. And he was 16 when he was doing his FP1 sessions. They were like, okay, this we need to maybe rethink this. Kids are really young at this point, and the cars go really fast. So they came up with the super license points, and yeah, so that actually what they were petitioning FIA was to allow him to come in ahead of his birthday and with not enough super license points. So it was. I don't think it was ever going to get approved again. It was really weird that they even put that out there because he turns 18 soon. It would really have just been like, oh yeah, to get him in for Imola, which I don't think Williams was ever going to entertain. I don't think they're going to make a mid-season switch. I think they're going to give Logan the time. I think Antonelli needs the time in Formula 2. Again, he skipped Formula 3. He's coming straight from Formula 4 into Formula 2. So he needs time to get some, hours behind the wheel in Formula 2 before he even hops up to Formula 1. I will say, though, that James Vowles, I'm rocking the Williams, and Alexander Albon just signed, locked down for a 2-year. They're calling it a long-term deal. I'm thinking like it's a 2-year with an option.
Mhm.
But so now Albon secured as like the number one, mainstay driver, veteran. That opens up the door to, potentially bringing in someone like Antonelli if they want to bring in a rookie. Or maybe Valves decides to go a different direction and really focus on his team and not kind of being a stepping stone. And then maybe Mercedes is kind of forced to, pull the trigger and bring him in right away, or let him run another F2 season. So it could really go a lot of different ways with Kimi Antonelli. But yeah, a lot of hype. And he finally had a good performance. I mean, he didn't start the season off great. Prema in general didn't start the season off great. Behrman wasn't doing too well either. But in Australia, Kimi came in fourth in the feature race, so he got some valuable points there. So he'll be looking to continue on that in Imola.
Before we look at the F2 standings, you just made me think of something, and this is where you and I kinda pat ourselves on the back. We're now 2 for 2, both of us,
Right.
in accurately predicting driver seats. So if you have
Hulkenberg and
not
Albon.
Hulkenberg to Stake F1, future to be Audi, and now Albon well, Albon wasn't really that far out there, but I think we
You
we
never
made a pretty
know.
darn good call
Mercedes
with
could have
Hulkenberg.
scooped them up.
Yeah.
But yeah, 2 for
So,
2.
apparently Albon was talking to a couple other teams, but, you and I both believe that the best spot for him it was definitely Williams, and,
Yeah.
2 for 2. Now, the divergence is gonna start happening when you and I made some of our crazier picks, so if you have
Oh,
not
yeah.
gone back and either watched or listened to that episode, go ahead and do that. That was a really fun chat, and, we will be revisiting that, throughout the year, and definitely do a full debrief at the end of the Formula One season, and see where see where a bunch of hacks thought was going to happen just based on a gut feeling.
Yeah, I think a lot of them, we're gonna see like the first seat, we agreed on because it was kind of one of the ones that made sense, was more cut and dry. And it's the second seats for a lot of these teams that are really up in the air, up for grabs. So that's where, like you said, the divergence is gonna come in. You could be right, I could be right. Neither of us could be right. I'm sure we'll see all three scenarios across the different teams. So, but yeah, excited.
So the rest of the F2 standings here, Scott, and as you mentioned, for those that don't know, the F1 Castle, you do Formula One breaks, and a
Yep.
good portion of those breaks are made up of Formula 2 drivers. Now, there's some team breaks where Formula 2 is, broken out as an entire, section where you don't split out the drivers, but then most of them, each of these drivers that have cards, each have their own spot that you can purchase. And if Scott opens cards and there's a driver hit, you would get those cards. So for those that like to prospect, and we have kind of uh, not this was not an original thought necessarily by us, but we talk about it often, is a lot of the first cards that a lot of these drivers have in F2 is kind of like their Bowman. They're not in
Yeah.
their Formula One race overalls, their race suit. However, we've seen it. Starting with the 2020 set, we had Mick Schumacher, who had a cup of coffee in Formula One. Yuki Tsunoda, who's still in Formula One. Nikita
Right.
Mazepin had a cup of coffee. We've had Oscar
He
Piastri,
had a
Liam
shot of
Lawson.
espresso.
Yeah, exactly. He kind of spun it around fast.
Right, that's right.
Um, so there obviously is, certainly a market here. So that's why we want to talk about this. So, you've been rocking the Zane Maloney hype for a little bit. He is here on top of the standings with 62 points after
That's
three
right.
races. It's really tough, and I'll throw it back to what we talked about last episode out, where you had the opportunity to talk to Jack, "How you doing?"
That's
And
right.
the season is only 3 races in. These standings could look very different. So there's a lot of names on here where you can still see that they have cards available in the top 2023 product, but I don't think either of us would disagree, in a few more races, this is gonna look entirely different, because you don't see Oliver
Yeah.
Behrman on here.
Mhm.
Antonelli's barely in the top 10. There's a lot of
Yeah.
other drivers that Um, why can't I think of Martins?
Yeah, Victor Martins. Yeah.
Victor Martins, thank you. So there's a lot of names that we would expect to see here that we don't.
Yeah, and like you said, we're only 3 rounds in, and obviously in Formula 2, 2 races each round, sprint and feature. And so we're 6 out of 28 races, right? There's 22 races left for 11 more rounds. There's a lot more F2 racing to come, and this could be completely flipped on its head, right? I mean, we have our top 10 here, and if you're not, watching on YouTube, Zane Maloney's in first with 62. He's got 2 race wins. Paul Aaron in second with 47. He doesn't have a race win, but has consistently finished in the top 5 multiple times throughout the season. Dennis Hauger on 41 points does have a race win. Was actually looking really good in Australia until he crashed in the feature race. Isaac Hadjar, who kind of came out of nowhere in Australia, he's got a race win. He won. He's got 34 points in fourth. He won the feature race in Australia, and he actually won the sprint race as well. He did get a penalty that demoted him down to 6th, but he literally like came out of nowhere. He he was sitting on single digit points before Australia, and now he's in 4th on 34. So again, it's so early in the season that we're going to see massive swings. I expect to see, like you said, folks like Victor Martins, Oliver Behrman to be on this top 10 list in short order. Antonelli will probably start moving up. Another thing that we talk about on here is like you said, who has cards. So you can see in this top 10 list, Ritomo Miata, Antonelli, Joseph Marti, and Paul Aaron, they're all rookies in Formula 2, so they're not going to have cards in the 2023 set. They will have cards in 2024, and that would be like their first Bowman. But everyone else on here, the other 6 drivers, 5 out of those 6, their first card is in 2023. The only driver who's in the top 10 who had a card in 2022 is Dennis Hauger, who's currently in 3rd, right? So he's had multiple seasons in Formula 2. This is actually his 3rd season in Formula 2. He was in there in 2022, 2023, now 2024. So for Hauger, this is like win or get off the pot kind of a thing, right? Like he needs to win this season, and he's started pretty well, right? Even having a crash in the feature race, he's still in 3rd, has a win under his belt. But, it's really cool to see folks like Zane Maloney, the boy from Barbados, right, that everyone's been talking about. He's had a fantastic start to the season. Paul Aaron, a rookie, phenomenal. Isaac Hadjar, Kushmani. I mean, these guys are really doing well. I guess Enzo Fittipaldi, also has a card in 2022. But yeah, exciting. There's a US boy on here, Jack Crawford. A lot of people like to call the Craw Dog, down here in 8th, 26. He actually might have had, some of the best pace in Australia. He just started a little bit further back on the alternative strategy, ended up coming in 2nd. But Jack Crawford, I really like him. I think he's quick. I think he's got a shot, further down the line. But we'll have to see kind of how it goes.
One other thing, Scott, about this, and as you're talking about some of the other, obviously we're talking the 2024 Formula 2 standings here, and you mentioned those other prior years where we've got Formula 2 cards for some of these guys and others. The cool thing, because as Formula 1 cards become more prevalent, more people, you man of the people, are making people aware at these races that Topps has these products and stuff. The cool thing is you've got guys like Teo Porcher, who's now going to be racing in IndyCar for the rest of the season, minus the Indianapolis 500. The fact is there's some crossover appeal. And I do know that, and we have not covered this in any capacity, and I don't think that we ever will, but they made IndyCar cards, in that circuit. Yeah, park. So yeah, there we've covered it. But the cool thing is like top quality cards, chrome, etc. You have the ability to collect if you follow the other racing circuits, Super Formula, the other things that are there, Formula E. Like a lot of these guys can go to other spots, and there's some collectability there. So just because you open a box, a case, you hit a break, and you get some of these drivers that may not currently be racing, they may have some value because somebody that follows these other circuits may be interested in collecting their new favorite driver in that circuit. And oh, by the way, they've got Formula 2 cards from a certain year. So
Yeah, yeah, and that's true across, multiple iterations of different racing specs, right? I mean, you see a lot of drivers, some of them go over IndyCar, some super formula is a little bit more short term, probably. But a lot of these guys end up in WEC in endurance racing, you know. We'll see a lot of them in endurance racing. Louis Delatraz is actually a perfect example of that. He's in the 2020 set and he's been crushing it in WEC. So I mean, I think it's really cool. They don't have to be in Formula One to be collectible. You can still, be a fan of the other series of racing and enjoy that and be like, hey, I've got a superfractor of Louis Delatraz and there he is, racing in Spa 24 hours or 24-hour Le Mans. So, I mean, look at Antonio Giovinazzi. He was in Formula One, isn't anymore, but he just won Le Mans last year, which is, legendary race. So, yeah, super cool. And I think it adds some collectability, like you said, as well, outside of just making it to Formula One. The only thing I can really compare it to is like, in baseball, obviously everyone's trying to get to the major leagues. If you don't make it, I mean, I guess there's like the Savannah Bananas that some people are into.
Maybe that's where Nikita's gonna end up as the Savannah Bananas there.
Yeah,
Although
well,
I guess he's doing all right for himself, whatever circuit he's racing in. So
he's honestly Nikita Mazepin has been doing, dude. He's won a bunch of endurance races. He won like the 4 hours to Sepang recently. He's doing all right now that he's back to racing. So go for good
as long as
for
he's in a car that
Mazepin.
doesn't spin when he tries to turn it, then he's all set.
Yeah, true.
All right. So this is going to be a quicker episode. I just wanted to do a little bit of a debrief about Formula 2. I mean, I guess Scott, we didn't really talk about, expectations for the Formula 1 race. It was kind of the footnote to this episode. This is
That's right.
very Formula 2 centric. I know for those that follow you on Instagram at F1 Castle, nailed it. Yeah, I'm sure you're gonna have your picks and your castle call and all that other
That's
stuff.
right.
So I won't hold your feet to the fire on that. However, it does look like Ferrari's got some upgrades coming. The McLaren upgrades worked really well in Miami. They didn't expect that to be the track that it was going to see it. It looks like Mercedes is potentially holding off on theirs because their front wing is not behaving the same way it is in their wind tunnel. Red Bull. Who are going to be the second and third teams, do you think, here behind Red Bull?
Yeah, so I'll give a peek behind the curtain, right? I think we'll let the listeners of the podcast know a little bit before everyone else what my calls are. But I do think Red Bull, like you said, Red Bull's actually they're bringing upgrades, and Adrian Newey talked about at the beginning of the season. He was like, "Yeah, I think our car around race 7, which is Imola, will look very different." So I'm scared of Red Bull
Do
because
you
it's
think you're going to see the
exciting.
zero? I mean, this is recording on a
Oh,
Thursday. Do you think we're going to see the zero side pods?
no, no.
I think he was
I
just trolling
Yeah,
Mercedes.
I don't think we'll see that, but I do think we'll see some additions to the car and some aerodynamic areas that maybe do look a little bit different. I don't think we'll see zero side pod, but I know maybe something akin to it. I mean, it's really all around the air intake, honestly. But it sucks because we're all excited about McLaren's upgrades and the fact that Lando just won a race. And like Ferrari is bringing upgrades this week, which, Vasseur has been very tempered. He's like, oh, just a small step. But Leclerc and Sainz have both been like, oh, yeah, we're bringing upgrades to the car. We're ready to challenge. And it's like, oh, whoa. Vasseur's like, guys, don't overpromise and underdeliver here. But so we've had McLaren just brought a raft of upgrades. Oscar Piastri now gets the full upgraded package. You only had half of it in Miami, and they're supposed to go better in Imola. So McLaren is on the up and up. Ferrari's bringing upgrades. It's one of their home races. So you're like, oh, here we go. But then, Red Bull is going to probably spoil the party. They're going to bring upgrades and they're likely going to be ahead. So I think Max is going to take pole and win the race. I know, boring predictions there. And I think McLaren, actually, Lando historically has done very well at this track. So I think he's going to come in second. And I'm sticking to my guns here. I'm putting Oscar Piastri in third. I think it may be either the other Red Bull, Perez, or a Ferrari on the podium along with Max and Lando. But I'm going I'm going with the papaya. I think we're going to see Max in first, and then Lando second, Piastri third, and then this may actually influence why I have that prediction. Because don't hate me, Ferrari fans and folks over in Italy, because I know this is a home race. But my Castle call, which guys it's a bold
It's for
prediction.
fun.
It's
for
my fun call. It's something that's very outlandish. I think the only time it's really been a super outlandish call where it was correct was when Max DNF'd in Australia, which everyone loved that. So don't hate this, but I have that the Ferraris are gonna collide on lap 1 and crash out. Yeah, that's pretty spicy there. And
log
that's why
into
I
your
think both McLarens will be on the podium.
log into your DraftKings accounts now.
Yeah, so yeah, Ferrari upgrades are going to be great until they smash them up into each other. That's my Castle call.
That's awesome. I love it.
If that
All
if
right.
that ends up happening, I'm Nostradamus at that point.
Absolutely. So, not being Nostradamus here, but you do have a break coming up, Scott. We'll talk about this a little bit. By the time people either view or listen to this, you still probably a little bit of time to join this upcoming break you've got.
Yep. Yeah, so we're actually running 5 cases of 2023 Chrome. Should be a lot of fun. I mean, honestly, like autos, of course, but the inserts are so much fun in 2023. You've got Futuro, you've got F1 Armor, Hidden Gems, Turn Up the Lights, lots of cool stuff in 2023. So we're running 5 cases. It's going to be probably like a 5-hour break. We're running this on Fanatics Live. It's going to be starting at 9 o'clock Eastern Friday night. So you'll be listening to this probably Friday morning, afternoon. There may still be some spots. I think right now there's a little under half of the spots left. Everything's been discounted. So go in, hop in, grab a spot. If you want to join, there's everything from some of the stuff up top, like Max, all the way down to some of the F2 drivers that we were talking about earlier. So that'll be a lot of fun. Recently, we've also actually just earlier tonight, we cracked open another case of 2020 Sapphire. So we're going to be ripping some more of that later this weekend. I'll probably be posting that break maybe Saturday. But yeah, so a little bit of variety. We got 2023 Chrome on Fanatics Live and then 2020 Sapphire over on Instagram.
Awesome. Love to see it. And thanks for everybody tuning in. I think this is like episode 12 now. We greatly appreciate it. The subscribers are increasing. A lot of the
Incremental
people
gains, Brian. It's
incremental
like
gains.
we're
I mean,
Williams here. See, we're Williams. We're just, chipping away.
for sure. We certainly appreciate all the kind words and feedback. Again, we'll just ask if you can like and subscribe on the video. Would love the comments. I try to jump in and address the comments as the channel account a little bit, but also looking for on Apple Podcasts the like the 5-star reviews that will help definitely get if you're be so inclined, we certainly will read them on air if you can leave us a nice 5-star review
There
on
you go.
Apple Podcasts. I don't know if Scott, if that is like if that's just what we see in here in the United States or if that's viewable worldwide. I guess I should know
I think you
that,
can. I
but
think it can be worldwide. Yeah. So if someone over in, we may have to go to a separate section, but you definitely can see the reviews from other countries and read them, which just may be a little
awesome.
bit harder to access. But yeah, so if you're in
Yeah.
Australia or the UK or anywhere else in the world, feel
Or,
free.
if you are a huge fan of the show and you just happen to just, borrow somebody's phone for a moment, hop on to Apple Podcasts, leave the rating there
Bump
too.
it up.
It
Shill
just
our podcast to the moon.
yes. You're not gonna shill these bids, but we're gonna shill the reviews.
There you
I still think it's funny that there's like just one person that just strongly dislikes our podcast and they just downvote it
You got
every
it.
time.
That's how
Which
you know you're doing it right. You got the
yeah,
trolls, the haters. It's part of life.
yeah, it is. It is. Probably helps the algorithm too. But thank
Exactly.
you to that person. We appreciate it. All right, Scott, I think that's enough. We're about 35 minutes or so. So I'm going to kick it over to you, let you do your thing.
That's right. Well, guys, excited for Imola this weekend. Can't wait to finally go racing again in Formula 2 and Formula 1. But in the meantime, collect your cardboard, keep it carbon.